Welcome to the video and lecture notes for Monday. So ideally you have the slides open or you're just here to listen to my talk about arrays. So here's our array initialization, array traversal. This is kind of what we're going to talk about for today. Your learning targets, you're going to represent collections of related primitive or object reference data. Keep in mind we can store primitive or reference types using 1D arrays. That is the focus of Unit 6. Here is our array initialization. When we make an array, this is the format we are going to use. There are two options that we have. Option number 1 is to use default values. Option number 2 is to have initial values. In other words, are you going to fill your array before or after it is created? The most important thing about arrays is they store a fixed number of elements. So an example of utilizing an array would be such as an array of string types. So we would write string square brackets with whatever this would be. So it could be something like names. And then you can have a whole list of names inside your new data type. Keep in mind, however, there are two ways you can do this. You can either make a blank array list. So we would write new, our data type we are storing is strings, and then num elements represents the total number in your list. This line here would say, cool, there exists a names list. It has 4 spots for people, or 4 spots for strings. Inside each of these boxes, I would expect to have a string value inside each and every single one of these. Additionally, when I make this list, it has a set number of boxes, each with their own index. Up here we have the indices. I just wrote them as 0, 1, 2, 3. Like strings, we start from index 0. And the other important thing is we have this cool variable called length. If I write names.length, this will always return the total length or the total number of items. In other words, names length returns this value here, that 4. This is the first way that we can make a brand new list or array. Another way to make our array is to give it default values. So I could write string, angle brackets. I'm going to make the same one. Again, you can't have the same variable name on the same file, but pretend. So we have a bunch of names, and instead I can set them to be default values. That's a curly bracket. Sorry for my terrible handwriting. Inside the curly bracket, we're going to put each value, value 1, value 2, all the way to the last value. So we're actually going to put in some names. We'll put in Bob, Alice, Nancy, and Joe. Oops, that's the wrong kind of bracket. We want the curly brackets. And this is how we initialize an array with initial values. Very similar to the last one. We have a names array, and it's going to look like this, with all 4 boxes in there. The first box has the string Bob. The second box has the string Alice. Third box has the string Nancy. And fourth box has the string Joe. We still have our indices 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, names is the name of my list. Dot length is going to be the total length of all values. That'll be 4. Keep in mind this works just like strings, where our index, our last index, is always going to be 1 smaller than our length. All important things to keep track of. The weird thing about arrays is, again, that they store a fixed number. I want to emphasize this. Once you have a number of items in your list, you cannot change that. So we always have to have 4 items in this names because we initialized it with 4 values. Or down here, when we created the name string, we put 4 names in. We could change out one of those names. We could pull a name out. We can save that info. But regardless, we must have 4 spots. This box that we create down here is immutable. It is a final variable. Think of length, the variable down here, as a fixed, immutable, or a final variable, things that cannot be changed. Here is our array example. Now, This line right here is kind of interesting. We have array name with the element here. This is a reference. We're always going to reference something in a box here. That reference can go either on the left side here if we want to change its value. So this last bullet point down here says meal2. In other words, look at the array called meal, find index 2, and change that to now be pasta. It's been a long time since we talked about this, but as another reminder, equal signs in most coding languages means save or set a value. So here's our meal. We are accessing index 2, and we are changing the thing at index 2. So in that case, apple is going to become pasta. That would be that last bullet point down there. We can also access pieces of our list. So in the second bullet point, if we put our reference, if we say, cool, look at array name with the element number or the index number on the right side of an equal sign, what we are doing is saving a variable as that thing. So here we are saying string breakfast is the item at index 0 for the list called meals. In other words, breakfast is going to be this string called cereal. So depending on which side we put this array name element reference, then it does different things. On the left side, we are saving or setting the array list or the array item, sorry. And if it's on the right side, we are accessing. If you want to see some examples, that's also listed on the slides. You can click the link. Here are the funny quirks. We already talked about the length variable. Length is a final variable, therefore the amount of items a list can store must stay the same. If you say you have a list of 3 items, there must be 3 items. Now, one of those items can hold a default value. Here's a list of what we call default values. Any numerical default value. So if you don't set a numerical value, it'll be 0. What that means in reference to arrays is, let's say we have an int array called numbers, and I'm going to initialize a new array with no values. So new int, and we'll put 3 items in this list. What we're going to see then is the numbers list is going to look like this. It has 3 boxes overall, 1, 2, 3, and inside those boxes will be the default values. So the default value of integers will be 0. They still have their normal indices, starting from 0 all the way up to 2. And these are all default values that we set because we made a brand new int array without saying what the initial values were. Let's do an example with strings. So let's go back to our string of names. Here is our square brackets. We're going to put a list of names in here. We're making a brand new string array that will hold a total of 4 values. As a result, here is our names list. I'm again going to make 4 boxes. And the default value of string and other objects, these are all objects, all reference types, they're going to be null. In other words, meaning empty object, no object. This is what this initialized array will look like. Same thing for booleans, you could figure that out on your own. That is the basics that you need for 6.1 arrays. You're going to work on this CodeHS assignment today. You're going to watch the CodeHS video if this was a little confusing. And of course, if you are missing anything, I want you to work on that as well. You'll see the IOU Term 1 assignments under Canvas. And of course, if you're missing any Unit 5 stuff, get that done and also get the arrays done as well.